Good morning. My name is Chad Schmidt, as Pastor Ryan said. Motor carrier officer with the Michigan State Police in the Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Division. I've been with the State Police for working on my 7th year now. Been a human trafficking coordinator for the 1st District for about 3 years. And then just recently, took over as the state human trafficking coordinator. A little bit about me. I grew up in Monroe. I'm posted here in the Monroe Post, so I do patrol the area here. The state police has really began its focus for human trafficking, in about the last 10 years or so. Started just before I joined. We have coordinators in each district throughout the entire state that are responsible for equipping our officers and the communities with the knowledge and tools they need to try to combat this terrible thing that is human trafficking. And so hopefully today, I hope I can bring some new information to you, some good information that you'll be able to use if you were ever asked about it, you had some information that you would be able to give. So just the disclaimer, first service was the second time I gave this presentation. Only the second time I gave the presentation. So if it goes poorly, just remember that Pastor Ryan was the one who asked me to do it. He asked me to do it, and Pastor Bob, he approved it. So just remember those two things. So when you're talking about human trafficking, we talk about the goals of the presentation. All you have to, sorry. Okay, goals of this presentation, you have to remember, is AIR, A-I-R, pretty easy to remember, and that is awareness, it's the indicators, and the response. We're going to be looking at these 3 main points and how you can identify human trafficking and combat it. Awareness. What is human trafficking? What are the 2 types? And is it in my area? This is the easy part. Excuse me. So awareness. What is human trafficking? What are the 2 types? And is it in my area? I'm sorry. I said this in first service. I'm not a multitasker. I apologize. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll have this awareness that you'll be able to tell others about. The indicators. What are the signs? So what are the signs of human trafficking? What are those things that should set off that spidey sense? What is it that makes that hair stand up on the back of your neck that something's not right? Sometimes it's a single thing, sometimes it's a combination of things. And maybe it's easy to overlook, but when you put everything together, it increases that reason to believe that something is not right. The response. What can you expect from a victim? What should your response be? And then we're going to be talking about a victim-focused response. Human trafficking a lot of times is like the elephant in the room. It's just such a big problem that you can't really get around. You try to maneuver around it. It's just something that takes up so much energy to try to figure out how to solve this problem. And the solution is so obscure that it's such a large undertaking that you might not know where to start. But there's the old saying about how do you eat an elephant? Anybody know that? One bite at a time, right? One bite at a time. So there are 2 types of human trafficking. The first one is sex trafficking. The second one is labor trafficking, are the 2 that we're looking at today. Okay. Human trafficking defined. Sex trafficking is the commercial sex act induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person performing the act is under the age of 18. Labor trafficking is using force, fraud, or coercion to recruit, harbor, transport, obtain, or employ a person for labor or services. That includes domestic servitude, farm work, factory work, and when I used to live out in Colorado Springs, the big thing was lawn care, lawn services for labor trafficking. And in the and for the purposes of human trafficking, when we talk about minors, we're talking about any individual under the age of 18 and emancipated minors as well. Even if they're emancipated, they are still considered a minor for the purposes of human trafficking. So, wondering if you have human trafficking in your area. So do you have any of these in your area? And I don't know if, Monroe County is kind of a smaller place, so do you have roads and highways nearby? Couple? I don't know if anybody uses these or not, but computers? Does anybody here use a computer? Their kids use a computer for everything, right? And last, what about a cell phone? Anybody here have a cell phone? Anybody in here's kids have a cell phone? Anybody in here struggle to kick their kids off their phone and participate in the real world? Am I alone there? Nobody else? Okay. All right. So, if you have any of those things, human trafficking is definitely in your area. These two individuals right here, if you take a look at this picture. This is Tory Brothers Helton and Anthony J. Miller. He's 23 and she's 29. This is a case right from Monroe County that happened just within the last couple of years. There was a girl from Georgia, 16 years old. I don't know her name. They never put her name out because she's a minor. 16-year-old from Georgia, came from a pretty rough life and family home. Ended up moving in with her sister in Toledo, trying to get away from that rough family life. Eventually ended up meeting Mr. Miller here. Became his girlfriend. Again, mind you, 16-year-old girl, 23-year-old man. Became his girlfriend, ended up moving in with these two, with both of them. And it's times being what it is, money is tight, had to make a living somehow. So Ms. Brothers Helton suggested that they begin selling sexual services, both of them together individually. And then they also started selling explicit pictures online of the 16-year-old girl. And they would set these up through social media and classified ads. Case went to court. Eventually they got busted. Case went to court. They were both found guilty. The female Brothers Helton, she ended up getting 35 to 240 months in prison. For her role, he got 365 days for his role in this particular case. And when you're talking about judicially, about talking about the statutes of human trafficking and how they're prosecuted, multiple cases of human trafficking within a single case, if you have, say, somebody who's trafficking 3 people at the same time and they were found guilty on all 3 of those charges, the sentencing for that actually stacks. It's not run concurrently. So they get 30 years per case or per victim. A would get 30 years for victim 1, 30 for 2, 30 for 3. That'd be 90 years in prison they would actually be sentenced to. But of course, Michigan local courts have sentencing guidelines. As you can see, she got up to 20 years. He got a year. So if you're wondering if it's in your area, it is definitely in your area. This picture, this is about a quarter square mile picture of Monroe County, of an area in Monroe County, right in the center of the county, basically. This house right here, that arrow's pointing at, that's my cousin's house. He's a little bit younger than me, got married not too long ago, has a brand new baby girl. This building right here is an elementary school. That's actually the school my kids went to. 2 of them have come through there and are now out of it. My youngest now still goes there, is going there for her sixth grade year. That right there, that is the house that those two got busted out of. So literally in the backyard of this human trafficking house was an elementary school with however many kids that go there, but my kids go there. Literally in the backyard. So I can almost guarantee you that either you know somebody that goes there or somebody whose kids that goes there. It is in our area. So when we're talking about the elements of human trafficking, we talk about the actual statutes of the actual law of human trafficking. There are 3 things that you need to look at. You look at the process, means, and the end. Okay. Back when we were looking at the definitions, there were 3 words. I didn't point them out this time. Do you remember what those were? They're up there now in the middle. Force, fraud, or coercion. You need to make sure you remember force, fraud, or coercion for this presentation. So the elements of human trafficking, you're looking at the process, which is recruiting, or harboring, or moving, or obtaining. Okay, and just make note that it says or. It doesn't have to be and. So you can mix and match all of these elements in a certain case. So you don't have to have recruiting and harboring and moving. You can have recruiting alone, or harboring, or moving, or obtaining alone. By means of force, fraud, or coercion, again, individual, you can have any one of those elements. For the purposes of involuntary servitude, debt bondage, slavery, or commercial sex acts. Again, you can mix and match anything. You have harboring by means of force. For the purposes of commercial sex acts, or obtaining by means of coercion, for the purpose of involuntary servitude, involuntary servitude. And again, so when you're talking about minors in these cases, none of these means have to be met. If it's a minor involved in a sex case, whether there's force, fraud, or coercion or not, it is human trafficking. It's considered human trafficking and it's prosecutable. So one of the common misconceptions is that human smuggling and human trafficking is synonymous, which they really are not. They're similar, but they are not the same. Smuggling is, if you think of smuggling as a end-to-end transaction, okay? I've been paid to pick up this person in this location, transport them to this location, I drop them off, that transaction is done, that is done, I'm done with that business. That's what smuggling is. It's travel, typically, a lot of times it's across international borders. It doesn't have to be international, it can be domestic as well. But it is a business transaction for a specific placement, and once the person is delivered to the contracted destination, that transaction is closed, it's done. That's smuggling. Trafficking may be a factor, and it says may because you don't actually have to have travel for trafficking, They may be transported from one place to another, but what we're actually finding is that kids in particular, they're actually being trafficked right out of their own home. They live with their parents, they live with their guardians, whoever it might be, whatever the situation, but they're actually being trafficked right out of their own room. They're not being snatched away and taken away, they're being trafficked right out of their own room. It often starts as an opportunity for a better life, money, or something of value. So they meet, if they're the traffickers look for somebody who's in a bad situation and they offer them a better one. You know, they'll offer them nice clothes, they'll offer them eventually a place to stay, nice transportation, good food, they'll take them out and buy them stuff, just kind of wow them to kind of entice them into this lifestyle. And then control will always be a continuing factor through force, fraud, or coercion. So it's an ongoing thing with trafficking. Excuse me. One thing, I say this a little, cautiously, but I'm sure people have seen on Facebook or whatever the post of a friend who said I was at Walmart the other day and this guy was following me the entire time and man, he was just looking at me weird and I just felt really weird and he wouldn't leave me alone, but he never said anything to me, he just followed me. And so I had to get the manager to take me out to my car and oh man, that guy almost kidnapped me. And man, I would have been put into human trafficking or whatever the case may be. I'm not discounting that that's never happened. I'm sure that has happened, but more often than not, you're not seeing that kidnapping event, this snatch and grab kind of event. They don't need to do that. They don't need to. Traffickers don't need to put themselves at that risk. They can do it just by just by enticing their victims into the lifestyle and leave them right where they live. So I need a little bit of participation. Would one of you mind standing up? Any one of you? Which one's the brave one? That one? Excellent, thank you. Sir, would you mind standing up for me? Yes, sir. Yep. Appreciate that. Ma'am, and would you mind standing up for me? Yep. Appreciate that. Yeah, sir, in the yellow shirt, would you stand up for me? And so, okay. So if everybody look around at each other, it's standing up. Pretty diverse group of people, right? There's different age, different genders, I don't know, different socioeconomic backgrounds. When you're looking at who is at risk, the point of this is that there is no set demographic of who can be trafficked. Anybody can be trafficked because it's sad to say, but there is a market for everyone, right? I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for helping me out. So when you're looking at who is at risk, you look at people who have traits of vulnerability. They come from diverse ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds, varied levels of education. Victims can be anywhere from people that are still in school, not even graduated high school, to people who have college degrees. They can be anybody. Documented or undocumented immigrants. This is a big one that we see is undocumented immigrants. They may come to the country as documented immigrants. They get into the country, but once they get into the lifestyle, what happens a lot of times is that the traffickers will actually take all their credentials, their passports and IDs or whatever it is, so they have absolutely no means to support themselves. If they ever wanted to try to get a plane ticket or a bus ticket, you have to have some sort of ID that they're actually trapped where they are. Runaway youth in foster care system, and people with previous sexual abuse history. So really the point is that anybody can be a victim of human trafficking. A couple facts about runaways who are exploited. There's been a big shift. There's attempt to shift the view of these victims, that they are actually victims. They're not criminals. The ones who are actually out there soliciting. We're trying to make it so that if they are actually forced into this lifestyle with that force, fraud, or coercion, that they are actually the victims. They are not the criminals. The criminals are the pimps and the johns who are putting them in that lifestyle, and then who are consumers of that lifestyle. They're often badly traumatized from this exploitation. The victims. The issue of runaways includes that society views this as a problem within a single family. It's not a problem that has an impact for you or for me. Those people can't control their kids. That's a broken family. They're terrible parents. They've done everything wrong, whatever. It's not my problem. It's their problem because they don't know how to raise their kids. One of the views for runaways. And then traffickers don't just parade the kids on city streets anymore. They're shopped from homes, like I mentioned, via classified ads and social media, like the two that we just saw right here from Monroe County. The encounter, it's often held in hotels or truck stops. And if you think about Monroe County, you know, I'm sure you say a hotel that you think something like this is happening. I'm sure one pops in your mind. There's several that pop into my mind, but it's typically hotels and truck stops where these meetups are happening. So let's talk about teenagers a little bit. Teenagers in general, right? They don't think like we do, right? They don't think. We can all agree on that. Teenagers just don't think like adults do. They can be easy prey for those who say the right things. They can be manipulated. They may initially go off with someone unexpected. And they can come from dysfunctional homes or caring, loving homes. Again, like we talked about, it can come from anyone. We try to forget the things we did as a teenager, as adults. And back in the day, it might be kind of weird, like a girl's reaction, like, oh, nasty. If her friend told her that she was dating like a 45-year-old male or something like that. That would be their reaction back then. That's gross. But nowadays it happens. 40's a new 30. right? 30 is the new 20, whatever they say. But this happens. They go off with the older traffickers. So typically, a lot of times they go off willingly. Like I mentioned, there's not that snatch and grab as much anymore. They're going willingly with their traffickers. So social media and the internet. Things to look out for your kids if they're participating or they're frequenting these sites or apps or whatever. But you're looking at dating sites for teens. There are dating sites for teens out there where teens will actually recruit other teens. Teens that are actually already in the lifestyle will recruit other teens to come work with them in this awesome, better life that they can provide. And then other social media apps. A couple that I found. There was one way back in the day. It's been shut down. If anybody remembers the website Backpage, anybody remember Backpage? It was rampant with human trafficking and meetings being set up, so that got shut down. But there are other teen dating sites out there: My LOL, Scout, Yubo, Hot or Not, Meet Me, and I think probably people are familiar with what the app Tinder is. Anybody know what Tinder is? It's a dating app where it's specifically set up for, casual encounters. There's an app called Teenber. So a play on the word Tinder. You know what Tinder is used for? This is set up for teens. It just blows me away that that's actually called Teenber. It's a play on the word of Tinder. So some of the apps to look out for teens. These are very common ones. I'm sure you've seen your kids on them. Battle Royale, there's a video game, there's Fortnite, there's Battlegrounds, there's a Call of Duty one out now that's real popular. Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, these are all social media apps where people will actually try to meet with new potential trafficking victims. So what we're going to do now is we're going to test your knowledge. Okay, human trafficking, is it or isn't it? First service, this didn't work real good. It was a real easy quiz because the answer popped up right from the beginning. So we'll see if it goes a little better this time. So the first one. Yeah, no, you guys know the answer already. So Kelsey found an interesting opportunity to work at a summer camp. She's expected to work 70 to 80 hours a week for less than minimum wage after room and board. She's only allowed to contact her friends and family on an emergency basis or late at night on a weekend. So pretend that not trafficking is not up there. Would you say that's trafficking or not trafficking? I hear trafficking, I hear not trafficking. It's not trafficking. Why is it not trafficking? Because what are the three things that we have to have, the three elements? Force, fraud, and coercion, right? You know it. So if phone restrictions, if you think about it, if phone restrictions by itself was human trafficking, I would have been a human trafficking victim when I was at the academy for state police because I'm working 70, 80 hours a week. I'm working 78 hours a week doing stuff I don't want to do. I can't use the phone, so not trafficking. So good job. The next one. Again, don't read the first part. A musical artist travels throughout the country on a bus looking to recruit young individuals to engage in their merchandise sales. So a musical artist travels throughout the country on a bus looking to recruit young individuals to engage in their merchandise sales. Trafficking or not trafficking? That's a pretty easy one, right? Not trafficking. Maggie is a sophomore in high school. She offers sexual services on the weekends in order to have a little extra spending money, and she splits the earnings with her boyfriend, who sets up the connections. So trafficking or not trafficking? Obviously it's trafficking, but why is it trafficking? Is there force, fraud, or coercion? There is not force, fraud, or coercion, at least from what the information we have here, but somebody said it here, the age. She's a sophomore in high school, so we could probably assume she's under 18, right? So, human trafficking. Good job, whoever, I don't know who said that, someone over here said that. Lynn is in college and works at an adult entertainment venue as an escort to pay her tuition. At times, her clients physically or sexually assault her during her encounters. Why is that not trafficking? So she's over 18, okay. But where is the one of the three elements, the force, the fraud, or the coercion? Is there any? There is none. There's definitely crimes being committed here, right? But not human trafficking because it lacks those elements of, any one of those elements of force, fraud, or coercion. This last one here. Isaac works at a gas station for his uncle and is expected to work 16 hours a day. He sleeps in a cot in the back office and is beaten if he discusses leaving or talks to customers about his situation. He is paid minimum wage for the first 40 hours. Why is this trafficking? Yeah, force, right? Right, it doesn't say how old he is or anything, but we have force. So we know that it is absolutely human trafficking. Good job. Okay. So when you talk about human trafficking, if you think about the economics of human trafficking, like the bottom line for a human trafficker. Think about a drug dealer. What does a drug dealer need to do to be successful? He has to have a supply, right? He has to have somebody that he can buy his drugs from. Then he has to package it himself, and then he has to go sell it to sell it to other people, right? But what happens to that drug once he sold it? It's done, right? He doesn't have any more drugs. He's got to go repeat the whole process. He's got to go find his supplier again and repeat the whole process. Human trafficking is not that way if you think about it. You have a person that you're selling multiple times a night, as many times as you can fit into a schedule. What do you have the next day? You have that person still. So from a purely economical standpoint, human trafficking is very enticing for criminals, and that's because if you look at it's an entrepreneur's dream, so to speak. It's low risk, it's low investment, and it's high demand. It's high demand because it's everywhere. Numbers and statistics are kind of hard a hard thing to talk about with human trafficking. It's just a hard number to lock down because you just don't know exactly where it is. But it is estimated that it's probably the second or third largest criminal enterprise in the world, behind drugs and guns. So it is lucrative for criminals. So we look at indicators of human trafficking. So if you look at indicators of human trafficking, you're looking at somebody who has evidence of being controlled by somebody else. They have signs of physical or sexual abuse. They have fear or depression, a lack of documentation, talked a little bit about. And that's not just for international trafficked victims, that's for domestic people too. They will take whatever ID they have, just so they don't have that means to get away. If you're interacting with a victim, if there's a third party there who insists on being present for that interaction, and they answer the questions for that person, if you think about like in a medical field, if they're in the exam room with you and you're a nurse or a doctor and there's someone who insists on being in there with them and that person is doing all of the talking, is a very strong indicator that that person is being controlled. They don't want to make eye contact a lot of time. Branding, we'll talk about. Yeah, branding is just exactly what it sounds like. They actually brand their victims, and a lot of times they are loyal to their trafficker. Stockholm syndrome. Yeah, that is a very real thing where trafficked individuals, the victims will actually just become so dependent on their trafficker that they don't want to leave because that's who's giving them that better life. Red flags for labor trafficking. A lot of time, again, this is going to be probably more in like the medical field. If you're going to meet with somebody in the medical field, you're looking for dehydration, heat stress, stroke, musculoskeletal and ergonomic injuries, pesticide or chemical exposures, water and sanitation related illness, air quality or respiratory problems, untreated skin infections and irritations, and sleep deprivation. Excuse me. Very common things for you to look for if you medically, physically, for somebody who might be in labor trafficking. Excuse me. Red flags for sex trafficking. Persistent or untreated STIs or UTIs. Abnormally high number of sex partners. Using the language from the life, we'll talk about that a little bit more. Some words that might not make sense to you, but they makes perfect sense to them. They know exactly what they're talking about because it's lingo from that lifestyle. I just want to so this is presence of cotton or debris in vagina. It does not have to be a female again. So I need to update this and say genitals, in general, because it's for men or women. Trauma to the genital or rectum, problem with jaw or neck, repeated abortions or miscarriages, unintended pregnancies, or fertility problems. Some common things to be looking for sex trafficking victims. Mentioned tattooing their victims a little bit ago, and it's branding. That's exactly what it is. A lot of times a pimp who has several individuals in their stall, they'll brand them with actual branding, like cattle branding, or they will actually tattoo a name or a symbol on their victims. And it serves two purposes. One, it shows the girls themselves that they are that trafficker's property. They belong to that person. They can't get away. And two, it shows other traffickers that they belong to another trafficker. Language from the life. Couple words that are common to this lifestyle. Bottom. You can see that. You probably know what that word is. A female appointed by a trafficker to supervise. This is kind of a position of honor that's bestowed upon one of the girls or in the house. She's responsible for taking care of the other girls and mainly making sure that they're making their quotas and they're in and out on time, making their appointments, out there working. Daddy, term for the trafficker. I often have the victims call him. Family or folks is a term used to describe other individuals under the control of the same trafficker. Lot lizard. If anybody's a truck driver, this is a pretty common term at the truck stops. The lot lizard is somebody who's actually at the truck stop soliciting. It's a derogatory term. It's not what we should be calling them anymore, because, like we talked about, trying to shift that culture, that mindset of prostitution as being victims of human trafficking. Don't get me wrong, there are instances of prostitution where it is not human trafficking. It is somebody who is not doing it by force, fraud, or coercion. They're doing it on their own. But lot lizard is a derogatory term that you see pretty often. Quota, everybody knows what quota is. Reckless eyeballing, when somebody's not looking where they should. A lot of times they're supposed to keep their eyes down. They're making eye contact with people when they're not supposed to. A stable is a group of victims that the trafficker will call their group of victims. Wifeys, wife-in-law, sister wife. What women and girls under that control of that same trafficker might call each other. When you're talking about human trafficking, you need to talk about trauma. The actual physical effect on somebody's brain. If you look at this here, this is these are comparative brain functions between a normal brain on the left and then one that is exposed to as a traumatized brain on the right. The life can be traumatic and it can result in an actual physiological change to the brain, as you can see in that picture there. Trauma is a sensory experience. It's a personal experience, and it's not a competition. And what that means is that there are varying levels of trauma. Somebody could have a pretty brief experience but still be traumatized. Somebody could have a prolonged exposure to this lifestyle. Both trauma is very valid, even though this person may have been in it a month and this person was in it for 10 years. That trauma is real as real for both of the victims as it is for each other. So everybody brings their own experience and their own past to a trafficking situation. Trauma informed. When you're talking about victims of human trafficking, you need to be what's called trauma informed, which means you think about how the victim might actually react to you. Victims, a lot of times, they want to stay with or go back to their trafficker. We talked about that Stockholm Syndrome because they're providing them everything they need in their life, their food, their clothes, a little bit of money, if any. So they want to go back to their trafficker. Substance abuse is very common in human trafficking. A lot of times it can be a pre-existing addiction. Somebody gets put into life, they are already hooked on drugs. It can be a coping tool that they use while they're in the life. Excuse me. Or it's also a means of control by the trafficker. The trafficker is their only source for the drug that they're hooked on, so they have to stay with the trafficker. Difficult communication. Victim substitutes words for other words that may not make sense because they are terms from the life. I know I'm thinking about talking to teenagers nowadays, right? They use words what are you talking about? It makes perfect sense to them, but I have no idea what you just said. It's a lot like weak. Anybody know what I'm weak? Means like something was funny, right? Okay. So yeah, difficult communication. They might substitute words for words that make sense to them, but not to us because they learned it in life. Sensory experience. It can be hard for a victim to put together coherent sentences and have a normal conversation. When I have a conversation with somebody who has not been traumatized, I would expect them to respond to me in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 order. But you talk to somebody who is traumatized, they may respond to you in a 2, 4, 3, B, C format. They may not make sense to you because their brain has literally been damaged from the trauma. And a lot of times they might be hostile towards you. In that case, you just have to do your best and keep yourself safe. And then the victim does not see themselves as the victim. We've talked about that. A lot of times they are a contributor to a family. They're in a family that they are that they're helping, that they're taking care of, that they're supporting. So you remember these two from earlier. Excuse me. We're talking about trauma informed. I'm going to read you a statement that the 16-year-old girl gave during the court case. This is what she said. She said, "I didn't see a problem with my or any of our actions until all was said and done. Neither one of them forced me to do this, but looking back, I do wish that someone would have stopped me. I'm not trying to say they did nothing wrong, but we all make mistakes." So she said, "I'm not trying to say they did nothing wrong, but we all make mistakes." So either this girl has a saint-like capacity for forgiveness, or there is something physically wrong in her brain that it makes this okay in her brain to some degree. So I feel like this is a really, really good illustration of that trauma. So when you come across the victim, you need to have what's called a victim-focused response. So first, you got to remember the people that are being trafficked, they are victims. Okay, if there's that force, fraud, or coercion, they are the actual victims of human trafficking. They may not see themselves as victims, so they may not want to hear what you have to say about trying to get them out of that lifestyle. Many of them are traumatized. So what comes with that trauma, you need to keep that in mind. If you come across them, collect whatever information you can get out of them. And it's going to be a case-by-case basis of how far you are wanting to take that, because you need to make sure you just assume that if you come across one, you're being watched. So if you have a victim with you that is an actual victim of human trafficking, more than likely they're not alone. There's somebody there that's responsible for them, that is there watching you, watching what you're doing with them. So in that case, you need to be careful. You need to make sure that if you feel like it's safe enough that you can try to act on it, you maybe want to try to act on it then. If not, you may want to just call. We'll talk about responses here in a minute, but maybe you just want to call and make a report after the fact. So once somebody is actually taken out of that lifestyle, there's basic services that's needed by the victims. And it really is things that we take for granted. I mean, it's housing, healthcare, immigration assistance for those in need, food, income, employment, legal assistance, The really important thing for a victim of human trafficking coming out of that lifestyle is housing. They need someplace safe where their trafficker cannot find them and cannot contact them, and hopefully that victim cannot contact or will not contact their trafficker, because they are so susceptible to going back into that lifestyle. So they need someplace safe that they can live away from their trafficker. Local human trafficking task forces. So human trafficking, the combating of human trafficking is a multidisciplinary response. It involves dispatch, law enforcement, judicial with the laws actually being written and passed, medical, social service, and then general assistance organizations. And each one of these need to make sure that they are victim focused when they come across human trafficking. Just like I've mentioned this whole time, victim focus. We need to make sure that they are our focus, that we're getting them safe and getting them the assistance they need before moving on and trying to, maybe trying to find out who's doing it to them and maybe try to make an arrest in that situation. One of the organizations that state police works with heavily is Truckers Against Trafficking. That's their logo there. They're one of the biggest organizations. They have a lot of resources. You can look them up online if you're interested. They have a lot of free resources in the way of like handouts and pamphlets and videos and testimonials. We work with them. They're a great organization to work with. This is their statement of Truckers Against Trafficking exists to educate, equip, empower, and mobilize members of the trucking and the busing industries to combat human trafficking. Reporting, we mentioned just a little bit ago. If you can try to, if you feel safe, if you feel like it's safe for you personally and them, you can try to intervene. If you can't though, because it's not safe, you can always call 911 and get that ball rolling straight through dispatch. Or you can actually call this number right here is the National Human Trafficking Resource Center. The number is easy to remember if you remember 3737. So 888-3737-888. You can call that number 24/7. They are always there to take calls. You can stay anonymous if you wish. You don't have to stay anonymous, but you can give that information. They compile all that information to find out where hotspots are that where they need to focus efforts. A couple of references for my information here. Truckers Against Trafficking websites right there. The National Human Trafficking Resource Center and the Polaris Project are three of the main resources I use for information. I'm going to end the presentation with a video. It's a tough video to watch, but it's very impactful. It's a very good video to watch. But I will just leave you with this. You have three choices. Basically, you can be a consumer and contribute to the problem of human trafficking. You can see it and do nothing and not help fight human trafficking. Or if you see something, you can say something, and you may actually save someone's life out of that lifestyle. So thank you for your time. I'll be around if you have any questions or anything. Come see me, but just watch the video.
You just take a seat.
All right.
Thank you so much for coming in. I'm Mary, by the way.
I'm Mary. Tonight.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Don't mind the giant microphone above your head.
I'll try not to.
There are 3 photos in front of you. If you could just pick one, it doesn't really matter which one it is, and show that one to us.
All right.
Could you describe her to us?
She looks youthful.
I feel like this is one of those situations where if I say he's 23, then he's actually going to be 16.
Hispanic, maybe not full, but part. Similar to me, actually.
Well, I mean, she's young, so probably has a lot of things to look forward to.
I would describe him as friendly.
She looks, happy. She doesn't look shy, but confident.
Anything she puts her mind to, she could achieve.
We actually have his story, if you could read that out loud to us.
Okay, Marcus. I grew up really close to my parents.
Adriana. I grew up with my brother and sister.
Amy. I remember watching the Olympics on TV when I was 5 and being totally in awe of the sprinters.
I was the middle child and easily the quietest.
I felt like no one ever saw me or cared.
Dad was too drunk to keep a job, and he never
even saw me unless I was in his way.
Mom worked 2 jobs to make sure we had food for every meal, so she was never here to know when he would hit us.
One day when I went to the mall, like I like to do to be out of the house, a man came up to me and told me I was beautiful and asked me on a date.
On our first date, he drove me around in his car and said we could eat whatever I wanted.
Every time we were together, he bought me something new.
Tom really cared about me, and Tom really made me feel special.
I was in love with him.
After only going out for 3 weeks, Tom offered me a way out of my home, asked me to move in with him.
So when he asked me to have sex with him, I did.
He would put his hand over my face until I couldn't breathe.
Tom had friends over pretty regularly, and I could tell that some of his friends were into me.
So I kept my door locked and hoped that no one would bother me.
After a few nights of crashing there, he said that I still owed him for letting me stay at his place.
He said he had a friend who wanted to spend an hour with me.
He told me I might have to do some stuff, but not to worry about it. It's not a big deal.
When I didn't want to, he slapped me and said no one ever cared about me like he did.
But I didn't know what else to do because I needed a place to stay.
His friends forced themselves on me and took turns while he watched.
One by one, they come down to the basement, telling me how pretty I am.
When they're on top of me, I just close my eyes and pretend I'm running.
I'm exhausted and I don't know what to do.
My name is Adriana. I'm 16 years old.
My name is Marcus. I'm 14 years old.
My name is Amy. I'm 12 years old.
I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
And I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
And I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
That was very different than what I thought. Especially because, like, being a girl and imagining, like, if that was me, like, that's, I don't even know. I can't even imagine what that would be like.
She deserves to be a kid, just like what she is in this picture.
It being so close to home is something that makes me want to jump out of this chair.
I wouldn't think that Grand Rapids is a place where anything like this would ever happen.
Because you don't want it to happen to anybody, and you really don't want it to happen to people that live where you live.
Thank you for sharing her story with us. I'd like to show you something if you wouldn't mind taking her picture and following me to the gym.
Oh, wow.
I expected something certainly a lot smaller.
Bar graphs and numbers but these are actual people.
I don't know, in like my world, in my bubble or whatever, we don't talk about this. It's not something you think about.
You know, what we see is only on the surface.
I mean, looking at this, sex trafficking doesn't have any discrimination, that's for sure. Ages, genders, can affect anybody.
It hits you right in your heart, your gut, your stomach. It's like, wow. Now it's like I feel like I have this weight of responsibility to see how I can help.
Changes through greater awareness and making people realize that this does happen here and will continue to happen until we decide to make it stop.